thank you for joining the Center for Justice and Law Spotlight Conversation series, where we talk about topics on health, justice, and law with guests. I am Rani Yimam, and I'm here with my classmate Grace. We're a student at Hamline University taking the course Health, Justice, and Law this semester. Our conversation today will be with Monali. She's a phenomenal guest, a fierce advocate whose passion is to uplift underrepresented communities. Hello, Monali. Welcome. It's so good to see you, and I'm so happy you're our guest today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to speak with this group, the audience, about my work, and I'll let Grace introduce herself as well.
Hi, I am Grace. We asked you to join us today because of your work and advocacy that you have done for the community and will continue to do. You inspire us with your social justice and political advocacy work. I would like to give you a chance to tell us more about what you do and what you will do in the future.
Oh, absolutely. So, like I said, I'm super excited to speak with the group. Just first off, my name is Monali Bhakta, and I am a political organizer and social justice advocate here in Minnesota. I work with multiple different organizations, but the one that I really want to highlight today is the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum. I think, especially with the current times and that brutal attack in Atlanta that we saw about 2 days ago. It's just so important to, again, uplift Asian American voices, but then also specifically, Asian American women who are obviously doing so much advocacy work on behalf of our communities, but oftentimes just gets overlooked. So I am organizing with the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum here in Minnesota. So our Minnesota chapter, and I'm super excited to talk about that work and, how we are planning to uplift the issue, like the socio-political issues that are specific to our community, which is full of, first generation families, immigrants, low income, working class families, and about the work that we're doing. So super excited about that.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. So how does your work connect to our theme this year of health, justice, and law?
Yeah, for sure. So, as part of one of the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forums, the different advocacy that we do, one of the like policy or like law. Social justice initiatives that we have is the HEAL Act, which is the HEAL Act for Asian American women and immigrant families, which this is a political campaign that's been in the works for the past 5 years. And the purpose of it is to work with federal lawmakers to remove policy and legal barriers to expand healthcare access to all immigrants. And it's something that, is something that's so important to myself as somebody who comes from like a mixed status family and has experienced that firsthand with my parents not being eligible for Medicaid or the ACA and, these expanded healthcare coverages that, we hear on TV as being for everybody and reducing economic barriers, but that's not the case. A lot of immigrants from different statuses, whether they're undocumented or permanent residents, have obtained permanent residency status. They are ineligible to qualify for these programs. And again, this just leads into so many systemic barriers, especially for our Asian American women who deserve access to free and accessible and, just equitable healthcare that has been denied due to the systemic racism and oppressive forces that are in play that just again degrade their humanity, but then also just set us back and not necessarily allow us to live healthy lives and not have the resources to have sustainable futures here in the long run in our country. So we are definitely trying to work with federal lawmakers and get, Senator Klobuchar or Senator Tina Smith or, Representative Betty McCollum on board to supporting this legislation because it has been introduced in the House of Representatives, has been introduced in the Senate, and has had co-sponsors who've supported this, but it just has not gotten enough support yet to, reach the next next phase of the legislative process. So definitely trying to promote that outreach and work with different organizations and different community leaders here in Minnesota. I think oftentimes we forget that it's not just NAPAF who's doing this work. There are so many different organizations here in Minnesota, like the Coalition for Asian American Leaders or, Asian American Organizing Project, that is also advancing this cause for Asian American families here in Minnesota. But we just have to be able to work with them and reach a common goal so we can mobilize more people to get involved with this effort.
Okay, so you talked about how you have introduced the legislature to almost everyone, and it still hasn't been passed. Why do you think it hasn't been passed, and what other ways can you introduce it in a different way to make sure it gets passed the next time around?
Absolutely. So I think the reason why this legislation has not gotten enough co-sponsors or hasn't gotten enough support is just the fact that, I think a lot of people don't like to hear the fact that it's expanding coverage to more and more people. Obviously, it promotes equity and inclusion and diversity within our healthcare system, but we just right now I feel like have the leadership, some people in leadership who just don't want to see that. And as you could see with this past 4 years of living in a very polarized and just racially charged country, I would say country, just because it started with our president who was in charge and put so many racist thoughts out there that so many lawmakers also thought it was okay to, have those beliefs and make it harder for immigrants, make it harder for women of color, anybody people of color, first generation families to live here. And that, obviously can be emulated in the fact that these policies are not getting passed or they're just not getting supported enough to be able to reach that final stage of actually becoming law. So as I said before, I think that there just needs to be more compassion and empathy within our political system and the leaders that are representing us. And if they don't, we have to be able to hold them accountable and to remove these problematic policies. Because even if you're a permanent resident here, even if you have permanent residency status here in the U.S., it's only until 5 years after that you can qualify for CHIP or the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, as we like to commonly refer to it, or Medicaid. So again, even if you're lawfully here, there are more and more barriers and just hardships that are placed upon by these institutions that are meant to protect us and are meant to govern us and to provide a safety net here in this country. But that's not for everybody. And that's something that we definitely want to convey to our lawmakers through storytelling and to actually share our lived experiences as Asian American women, as people who are part of the NAPAF chapter here in Minnesota, to mobilize and actually speak to our lawmakers on a personable level, that we are just human beings trying to make a living here in the US, trying to provide for our families, trying to provide for future generations to live and work here sustainably and to not feel targeted, because obviously these policies are put in place to keep people out and make it harder for them to live here and to achieve equity. So that's what I would say to that, is that I think the leadership that we have in place just doesn't see that or wants to put certain people above others, which obviously is just not right and very discriminatory.
That's really, really good. My question would be so you when you guys do this this advocating project with Asian women, do you work with other organizations, with other different ethnic women or minorities?
Yeah, definitely. I think that whenever we want to, market or advocate for HEAL, we always make it a priority of saying like all immigrant families,
Mhm.
which makes it very, like I would say, inclusive and approachable for others to also get involved and support this
Mhm.
legislation. And so the two people that have supported this legislation in the past for the Senate is Senator Cory Booker,
Mhm.
and also Lujan. I'm not exactly sure what her last name is, but she is from New Mexico, and she has supported this organization, this effort, and is really, passionate about it in the House of Representatives. So we really try our best to make this an intersectional effort, because we understand that healthcare access is not only deprived for the Asian American community, but for the Latinx American community,
Mhm.
African American community, and so many BIPOC folks and communities across the U.S., where it's gotten to the point where it's just become normalized.
Yeah.
We expect to not receive healthcare. We don't. I think it also makes it harder for BIPOC to really get involved within the political process if the laws that are in place are already not are meant to work against us. But then in addition to that, we're able to see it, and we're able to really reflect and say there could be something better for us as well. And there's a capacity to organize and the urgency, to really show that this is an issue. This is a life or death issue for so many people. And especially in this pandemic, the people who have been working on the front lines, whether they are working in the healthcare field, or in the restaurant industry, or the working in retail stores, the majority of them are BIPOC, or they come from underrepresented, low income, moderate income families that just want to provide for their families. So in addition to that, if they're not able to receive healthcare access, it again puts a barrier. And in the midst of a pandemic, it's much more urgent because, I've had people in my family pass away due to not having access to healthcare due to and contracting COVID. And that just, again, just shows the systemic barriers that are put in place. And this has been happening for, again, a long time. And so this has been happening, but this obviously with the COVID-19 pandemic has really put into perspective the systemic inequities and really put them to light. Before it was just sort of like brushed under the rug, or people just didn't talk about it, or they just felt uncomfortable talking about it. But now it's just like you can actually see it. You
Yeah.
can see who's being affected. You could see with the shutdown who was really being affected by this. And it's just, again, my parents are also small business owners. So due to the pandemic, obviously their mixed status prevents them from getting any COVID relief, but then also makes it harder to make a living because nobody wants to be traveling right now. So again, it's the working class, BIPOC, Asian American, as you saw, especially with the 2 days ago, the attack that happened, who are being most targeted by these racist policies and this overt racism as well that we really need to address and put a stop to.
Yeah. Um, Actually, I really like what you're doing and how you're like representing not just like Asian American, but also trying to like include other women in as well, like other low income families. My question was gonna be, so in the beginning of the semester, we talked about how sometimes you can get like healthcare, but it's not equity. Like you will not be treated the same way as like a white lady. Have you seen that when it comes to like Asian as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think that was something that we talked about in our earlier NAPATH cohort meetings, because I'm part of their Reproductive Justice Leadership Institute. So I'm a fellow for them. And one of the talking points that our facilitator brought up was the fact that like this pro-life movement, especially for people to continue and continue giving birth if they are forced to, if they can't have an abortion, it definitely impacts, I would say, BIPOC, low income immigrant families, because if they're not able to have sustain or provide for their child, but are also not able to get the abortion services because there are so many barriers in place, as we talked about with the healthcare barriers that I just brought up. It just it makes them very like trapped, I would say, very trapped and helpless, not knowing where to go to, because it's obviously, I feel as if there's just a very even in our healthcare system, there aren't many people that are BIPOC are able to create policies and actually look at this through an intersectional perspective, because it's not just about race, it's about class, it's about immigration status, it's about language, disabilities, disability status. So again, I think that really the barriers that are put in place are meant to sort of oppress and again make families not be able to thrive and grow in the future. So I would say that we are definitely working on that. And aside from the HEAL campaign, addressing the fact that this pro-life movement is just, it's rooted in, I would say, just a narrow-minded view of the fact that not everybody can afford to have a child, and they need to be able to feel comfortable getting an abortion too if the provider actually is able to value their lived experience and provide the services that are best for them. And that again, this pandemic has definitely showed us the fact that like there's just so much racial and gender inequity, I would say, within our healthcare system that we really have to address.
Okay, so that kind of goes into our next question is, how does your work connect to a spring terms of reproductive justice?
Yeah, I think that when we think about reproductive justice, it is really trying to dismantle the systems that were put in place by, I would say, predominantly white, affluent decision makers who a lot of times are making decisions for us, but not making decisions with us. And in addition to that, just making stuff up rather than actually going out to the communities and getting their insight of like how we can actually, provide reproductive justice and healthcare to all BIPOC communities from all walks of life. I feel as if there just needs to be more effort and more outreach to these communities because for the longest time, they're just going to be resistant, or they might just not feel safe, honestly, going to different healthcare providers if they can't, if they just are not valued as a human, and again, it just goes back into the systemic racism that we really have to address with this past summer's racial reckoning. I think especially here in Minnesota, we saw the fact that not only is there racial inequity in our criminal justice system, but it spans from our education system. It spans into our, healthcare system, our housing system, affordable housing, and so we have to be able to understand that a lot of these issues are intersectional and really provide, the best sort of policies and laws that work for the people that are actually being affected most by these policies. I feel like our decision makers are just so I don't know what it is, but I think that there's just so much pride and ego there that doesn't necessarily actually lead them to representing the people that are actually within their constituencies. So again, I think that it requires a lot of organizing and for us to also speak up. And I also understand the fact that it's a lot to ask for BIPOC communities to engage in social justice work. It's exhausting, to be honest. It shouldn't just be placed, the burden should not just be placed on us. I wish that more people actually knew what the HEAL Act was and could get involved. I wish that it was more of a call to action by our leadership, by people who supposedly preach the status quo, but I think that, as long as we are providing awareness and showing them that the status quo can no longer be maintained and it needs to be fought against, we hope that we can try to bring others on board our work as well.
So how can we support and elevate the work you do? like as a student, and for others, how do we like support and like elevate it?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the ways is to definitely, be able to do outreach, but then also engage in self-education. I think that
Mm.
for a lot of obviously our classes in grade school often taught us a very biased narrative that undermined BIPOC voices and history in this country. Obviously trying to learn more about Asian and Asian American stories and narratives here in the US, but then
Mhm.
also engage in self education of other BIPOC communities as well, who have been contributing to collective liberation here in the US, and really trying to uh, really dismantle these policies in a way where it's like understanding the fact that like this change is rooted in systemic racism that spans to the founding of this country,
Mhm.
and being able to, provide incremental change, but then also trying to hold our institutions accountable. I think that for me personally, I think that I see great strength and also people taking action when they're actually able to hold higher institutions, whether it's higher education or people who work in the healthcare industry at the top, to hold them accountable and actually have a productive conversation, but then also helping them realize where their faults and where their gaps are, because I think that all these higher institutions in the US just have this sort of lacking of bringing in diverse voices. So it's our job to definitely try to sit down with them and um, not come in with this like attacking mentality, but like trying to educate them into thinking that like what their policies are doing is wrong, but then also understanding that like that education can be taxing and sort of laborious upon us as well. So being able to take care of yourself as well, I think it's so important to reach out to these mental health resources that you believe will provide you with the uh, self-care, and also the realization that not everything should be burdened upon you. It's not your fault that these systems were created in the first place, and so you should not have to bear the brunt of this systemic racism in our healthcare system, our education system, criminal justice system, but also realize that like you're human as well and you deserve to take care of yourself. So again, it's self-education, and being able to learn more about these community organizations that are doing this work, such as NAPOF, and CAL and other organizations across Minnesota and across the country, and being able to learn what they're doing, try to get involved if you're able to, and also just realize that you are also a human, and you deserve to feel safe and do whatever is best for yourself as well.
Yeah. I want to know more about, because you talked about how we should be able to educate ourselves and then also like connect with different groups, but like sometimes people don't have like those information or like know more about it. What are some ways that like you can tell the audience, and also just a call to action like you said, because you like really want that? So what are some ways that we can, or our audience can do to like make sure that the words are out there, or like as your organization as well?
Oh yeah, for sure. So I think it definitely starts with building those relationships. If people don't have the access to, have access to these resources, your peers and your friends at your college, like Hamline University, for example, have lived experiences that are just as valid, and that you can learn so much from. So I think that there's um, so much enriching. Especially when we're speaking with peers that are able to really dive deep into like how are these policies actually affecting you, how are the college's policies actually are they hindering your academic success, or are they actually helping you achieve your professional goals? So I think that everything that these organizations are doing are trying to uplift underrepresented voices. So especially right now, I think that people are really trying to be able to listen first of all, to their peers, and actually understand the validity of what they're saying as well. Just because I think that for the longest time, we have been, especially underrepresented BIPOC minorities, have often been told to just sit back, be quiet, not overreact about our lived experiences. But when you're able to actually speak up and be able to create these relationships and actually learn from your peers who are just around you, and that actually leads to more self-awareness as well. So I think that that's what I've been able to do with this past year, is that reconnect with people and actually engage in productive conversation of like, these policies and these laws are meant to, hold us back, but how is it actually affecting you? Everybody's story is different. So I would say that like it really starts from home, and starts with the people that you're closest to. And the greater part about that is that like they also know people that you can learn from as well. So again, I think it starts with relationship building, and actually helps you become a better person and a better advocate for your community as well.
Okay, so you talked about people being able to speak up, but last week our speaker said something around the line that there's a difference between posting something, like just posting just because so you're not attacked, and actually speaking up. Like, how, I don't know what my question is, but like, how can our audience or like people in general actually speak up and not just to do something just to do it?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Very good question. Great.
Yeah.
I know I have, especially for this past year, have seen, especially with this anti-racism movement, saw on my social media that everybody was posting about it, when it first happened. But then as months go by, people sort of just forget, or they just, don't act upon the anti-racism education that they said they were going to do. And I think that that honestly, I feel as if it goes with being self-accountable. I think that people need to be able to have the maturity, and also the that they are saying that BIPOC, women of color represented, that actions speak louder than words, and that includes being able to get involved with your community organizations without having a stake in it for yourself. You need to be able to reach that sense of selflessness, and being able to understand that this is not meant to help yourself, but it's meant to help those who are most vulnerable. And I think that it just has to come from within, and like I said before, it comes from that relationship building. It comes from speaking to your peers, listening to your peers, giving them the mic, and giving them the opportunity to actually speak up about the issues that are going on with their lives due to these racist policies and these like systemically oppressive policies as well. So I said before, be self-accountable, but then also put your actions into words, whether it's going to protests, making a donation to an organization, because as sad as it seems, like money drives our capitalistic world, as sad as it seems, and that plays into so much of why there are so many big corporations out here who are not taking a stand, or took a stance at the beginning, but are still not following up with their actions of the anti-racism movement. And that's a problem. But like I said before, it means taking action, talking to your elected officials as well, holding them accountable, because they are the ones who are making these policies and laws that are going to affect us and our future generations forward. So I would say, getting involved in doing that research, but again, if you're not able to do that, be able to actually engage in self-learning by talking.
Yeah, that's I think I got a quote for a week. Action speaks louder than words. Due to time, we have to end this conversation. But oh my God, we learned a lot from you. Thank
Thank
you
you
for
so
your
much.
time. Yeah. Thank you for joining us, everyone who's watching us. We're going to save this conversation. I hope you will all learn a lot from the discussion because I learned a lot and I took a lot of notes.
Yeah.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Our next spotlight will be next Thursday on March 25 with our guest, Matt Clark, graduate assistant student, diversity and inclusion service, and also HU alumni. It will be the same time from 11:30 a.m. to 12 p.m. And also make sure to check out our April 30th webinar, Reproductive and Justice Birds Behind Bars. Yeah, and thank you so much and have a great day, y'all.
Yeah. Thank you for talking with us.
Of course. Thank
Bye.
you for inviting me. Thank you so much. You both have a good rest of your day.